Israel defense chief says he would oppose Israeli military rule in Gaza. Really? You don't say. Minister Yoav Gallant has called on Benjamin Netanyahu to publicly rule out Israeli governance over Gaza and lay out his post-war plans, warning he opposes Israeli rule in the Palestinian enclave. Interesting. Interesting. Gantz, quote, said his party will leave the government if cabinet doesn't approve a Gaza war strategy by June 8th, a tall and likely unfillable order for Netanyahu's coalition. Gantz's departure will be a precursor to government's collapse, but not automatically. Where is this from? Axios? Bibi's coalition government is falling apart because of this. Yeah, Netanyahu and the hardliners alongside him, their plan has always been... Okay, you know how even though we're like 7 months into this, or however long, even though we're this long into this, Netanyahu's cabinet still refuses to release like an official step-by-step plan. You know, that's a really normal thing for militaries to do, right? Or for governments to do, where they're like, okay, we don't know all the particulars because we can't see the future, but generally speaking, this is what we'd like to do. And of course, Netanyahu hasn't done that because the thing that he and his cabinet would like to do is kill them all or make them go away. And he doesn't want to put that to paper because, you know, that would look pretty bad for the press, the Western press. He can suppress the Israeli press, you know, which he has been, by the way. You can look into it. There have been plenty of crackdowns within Israel on dissenters. You know, in a way, this actually makes sense to me because if you think about it, one of the biggest obstacles to Trump taking over the country, you know, MAGA taking over the country, whatever, one of the biggest obstacles, if they did attempt a coup, would be the Pentagon. Because the Pentagon is, while not good, fastidiously bureaucratic and plan-oriented. You know, you've got a lot of West Point graduate nerds over there with their button-down collars and their obsession with graphs. Not really the zealous, hyper-fascist, you know, freaky zeal that you need to go along with like a MAGA QAnon Great Awakening type deal, right? This is kind of a parallel of that in a way, right? This guy, piece of shit, don't get me wrong, but the fact that there's no plan irritates him. That makes sense, doesn't it? He just doesn't have that zeal. The zeal of Netanyahu and the cabinet is, you know, compromises the stability of the region. Because that's a rational thing to think, right? Like, hey, Netanyahu's insane bloodthirsty bullshit is actually threatening Israel's presence here, not only by putting a gap between us and our Western allies, but also by antagonizing everyone, the Saudis, Egypt, Iran, and so on. So it makes sense that he would be more rational here. I think beyond asking for a plan, he called for having a Palestinian-controlled Gaza. Well, that is a rational thing to want, you know? Like that is a sane position to have, even if you are a Zionist. From a Zionist perspective, there are only so many possible outcomes here. You either do the genocide that Netanyahu wants, which jeopardizes Israeli autonomy and safety for basically no gain, except for just wanting to do the genocide, or you have a military occupation of Gaza, which went horribly the last time it was attempted and directly led to the current instability, or you have a Palestinian-controlled Gaza and just try to manage things externally in a kind of paternalistic but nonetheless somewhat rational effort, you know? It makes sense. This makes sense. You got to think for a while now that people like our boy over here, Yoav, have been thinking, I really hope Netanyahu doesn't turn out to be as crazy as he seems. But there's still no plan. Gallant's remarks come as serious questions about Israel's long-term strategy in Gaza are being raised both inside and outside of Israel after the Israeli military sent troops back into areas of northern Gaza it had withdrawn from months ago to battle Hamas militants who had returned amid a power vacuum. Israeli military officials have quietly warned, by the way, in case you just want a reminder on how competent the IDF is, apart from all the other examples you have, Hamas actually did manage to reoccupy and re-threaten portions of northern Gaza. We are talking about an area of the world scarcely larger than a large city or a large metropolitan area. And the IDF, the massive modern equipped military, was getting like outflanked by Hamas. I know they have their tunnels, but like, Jesus, man. How incompetent do you have to be? Time for a coup in Israel? Well, I mean, if the coalition falls apart, we'll see. Netanyahu might get even more openly undemocratic. Dusty Poncho, I read 2 words of your message, and it read to me like you thought Biden was responsibly handling Israel's behavior, and I've got my mouse cursor hovering over the permanent ban mod action. I think that Dusty Poncho, no, I'll give credit where it's due. I think that Biden's strategy of lovingly fondling Netanyahu's balls while giving him sloppy toppy, but slowly decreasing the amount of sloppy in the toppy until it gets like a little dry and toothy, with the threat of even more dry and toothy toppy in the future, has been an effective way of convincing him to stop actively mulching tens of thousands of Palestinian babies. I think that I think any call for him to have stopped altogether with the sloppy toppy or do anything besides it, I think they're hasty and ill-considered. And I agree with everything that you've said. Well, it's been an effective way to get liberals to turn on Israel. Yeah, I agree. Biden consistently defending Israel has been extremely effective in turning his party over on the issue. There have been serious conflicts between Bibi and the Israeli intelligence services too, as he's actively blocking them from telling the U.S. what's happening. Huh. Benjamin Netanyahu has banned Israel's intelligence and security chiefs from meeting with U.S. officials and lawmakers multiple times since the war began. That's interesting. That's amazing. Yeah. Netanyahu rejects the need for a strategy until Hamas is defeated. That is so crazy. I know this whole thing has been wacky, but I genuinely think it's difficult to fully process how insane a statement that is. Genuinely, why would we need a strategy until after we've won? It makes no sense. This is a good thing to throw at the people who don't think that a genocide is on the table, because the only reason anyone would ever say or believe this is if they knew the strategy that they would have to lay out would be so monstrous that it would alienate your allies. Nobody says this otherwise. No, think of this conventionally. The only reason you would ever say shit like this if you were asked persistently about what your plan is while you're going over to do something that could potentially get really bad is because you don't want to have to say, I think it's going to get really bad. It's comical. Banned directors of Mossad and Shin Bet intelligence security agencies from meeting with Senator Marco Rubio, the U.S. official said. Man, if things continue going this way, Biden's not even going to need to be the one who does the coup. So am I correct? If Gantz's party leaves the government coalition, that would mean the end of the majority, right? Would that be enough to remove Netanyahu from the majority power, or would it trigger a re-election? What's the prompt there? Not quite. They would need more. If nothing else, it would signal a massive lack of confidence. Gantz is not in coalition, but war cabinet, that's different. Well, yeah, because they have an emergency government thing going on right now, but it would still, the defense minister leaving in a time like this is pretty significant. It would prompt other smaller parties to leave too. That's the big thing. It is, this could be one of the big reasons why Netanyahu and his cohorts were so upset about the idea of the International Criminal Court issuing warrants for his arrest, because he had a feeling he wouldn't be able to stay in Israel for very long. People don't like Netanyahu. The people don't like Netanyahu. The government doesn't like Netanyahu, except for the other hardliners. He might reasonably anticipate the need to flee the country sometime soon after a failed crackdown. And if that's the case, yeah, he'll just go to Russia. He gets along with Russia just fine. It'll be fine. Gallant wants to implement the U.S.-Saudi deal, which includes Palestinian Authority to control Gaza, loads of aid money, and peacekeepers for Arab countries, which is probably the best plan. Well, we'll see if it actually happens. He wouldn't have to flee Israel so long as Israel is not a signatory to the ICC. No, Exel, you misunderstand me. He would have to flee Israel because his authoritarian governance would collapse and they would have him. He would flee from Israel. But then, of course, the ICC would be after him in other countries as well. So he'd have to go to another non-signatory country. Well, we'll see how it goes. Any loss of confidence in Netanyahu or any loss of internal power is a huge deal.